rolling.
Hello and welcome to Classic and Ancient Mediterranean Studies. What's the name of Athena's mother?
And thus, by attempting to kill himself over and over and over again, Phil Connors has come to the conclusion that he is somehow more than human, that he is immortal. What's going to happen in the next clip is the story of how he is disabused of that notion.
I've never seen anyone that's nicer to people than you are.
The previous sequence is succeeded by this sequence in which Phil gets to know Rita and realizes clearly that it is better to be a nice guy than it is to try to get her into bed or to try to accomplish anything nefarious with all of the chance he's had on all of these Groundhog Days.
I knew that I wanted to hold you as hard as I could.
Instead of trying to sleep with her, that is, he attempts to get to know her, and they have a wonderful day together.
I don't deserve someone like you. But if I ever could, the sooner I would love you for the rest of my life.
Did you say something?
And when he wakes up, he makes a resolution.
Are you the one who brought the old man in?
Mm-hmm. How was he?
Well, he just passed away.
What did he die of?
He was just old. It was just his time.
I want to see his chart. Excuse me.
Sir, you can't come in here. Sir, this is a restricted area.
Where's the chart?
Sometimes people just die.
Not today. It's hard down there at the bottom.
Here you go.
Come on, kid. Come on, Pop. Come on, Pop. Come on, come on. Come on, breathe. Breathe, Pop. Breathe, Pop. When Chekhov saw the long winter, he saw a winter bleak and dark and bereft of hope. Yet we know that winter is just another step in the cycle of life. But standing here among the people of Punxsutawney and basking in the warmth of their hearths and hearts, I couldn't imagine a better fate than a long and lustrous winter. From Punxsutawney, it's Phil Connors. So long.
So what's happened here? Phil Connors has reshaped his life so as to become someone who is recognizably a nice guy, a good person according to the standards that we use for being a good person in everyday life in modern America. What's wonderful about Groundhog Day is it gives Phil Connors a chance to reshape his life as if it were a story. That is, it is his life, but it's done in this supernatural context where he can live the same day over and over and over again and treat it as if it were a story. That's the basic groundwork for the parallel with what Odysseus does in telling his adventures in the apologue. So what kind of remaking am I saying that Odysseus is doing in the apologue? Well, now we get back to the reason for the presence of all of the eating in the adventures that Odysseus is telling us, and the Phaeacians. Like I said, there's one more eating danger for Odysseus that proves to be the reason for having so many eating dangers in the tales of the apologue, and that's an eating danger that lies outside the bounds of the apologue. I'm talking about the suitors. The suitors back on Ithaca eating up day by day all of Odysseus' stuff, eating Telemachus and Penelope out of house and home. Now, I always like to think that there's a wonderful bit of cheating here because Odysseus really shouldn't know what's going on Ithaca. He shouldn't know that he has to be the guy who is best at figuring out what kind of eating is right and what kind of eating is wrong. But the bard nevertheless gives him an opportunity to do it that way. And I love to draw a parallel in the cheating between that in the Odyssey and what happens in Groundhog Day, where, as you saw on that final day, the day when he resolves everything and he gets Rita and they're clearly going to get married, Phil Connors has a much, much bigger crowd than he should have if, in fact, he's starting that day at the same point that he started every other day. So Phil Connors remakes his story into the story of a nice guy. Odysseus remakes his story into the story of the guy who's perfect to deal with the wrong kind of eating, which is exactly what the suitors are doing back at his home on Ithaca. But what I really love about this parallel is that there's something deeper, and there's a fundamental similarity between the way that Phil Connors reshapes his life and the way that Odysseus reshapes his life through his story, which has to do with understanding what it means to be human. The thing that finally transforms Phil Connors and leads him to the resolution of the final day is recognizing mortality. Remember how he calls the old man whom he tries to save and is never really able to save, how he calls him Pop, how he calls him Father? I see that as a recognition of his humanity, and then because the old man ends up dying every time, of his mortality. He said before he was immortal, but now he realizes that he's not, that in fact he has to be mortal. Odysseus realizes exactly the same thing in the Odyssey. This is why sleeping and eating are so important in the stories of the apologue. It's when Odysseus falls asleep that the men open up the bag of winds. It's when he falls asleep that they eat the cattle of the sun. And Odysseus shows how human he is by sleeping and by the incredible hunger that he feels, and yet he also shows that there's a bit of divinity about him, which is exactly what Phil Connors shows when he is able to remake his life. This is what being human is all about, and this is the rooty thing behind it all, behind reshaping your story. It is a cultural truth value for us that we would love to be able to remake our own stories, and we are. We can, on a daily basis, change the way we do things. We can change the way we act. And both the Odyssey and Groundhog Day suggest ways that we might do that.